Welcome to the PurpleArmy podcast with myself, Ross McGregor, Graham Thompson and Stephen McLernan. In the next two episodes we'll attempt to put together a clan all-time team. This week we'll be selecting a goaltender and a defence. We'll also be talking about Zach Sullivan's new deal, Paul Swindlehurst signing for the Panthers, and Gerard Adams and the Sheffield Steelers. I'm joined now by Graham Thompson and Stephen McLernan. How are you, Graham?
I'm fine, thanks, Ross.
Stephen?
Yeah, I'm fine, thanks too.
I believe it's your birthday tomorrow, is that right, Stephen?
It is, yeah.
We'll not ask you how old you are, because I think it might be a touchy subject.
A wee bit, yeah.
It will be for those older than him. Yeah. I
think before we start, I think we'd like to thank the people who listened to and downloaded the very first podcast we've done. That's over 1,000 now. I suppose without people listening to it and downloading it, it wouldn't be worthwhile doing, so thanks for all that. As we said at the introduction, we're going to put together a clan all-time team. The format being we're going to select one goalie, 4 D-men, 6 forwards and 2 British players. I think we decided, Graham, that we wouldn't be including any Red Wings guys called Drew Miller in this.
You didn't mention him by name, but if you insist that that's one of the rules, then fair enough. But he would be an automatic inclusion for me, but rules are rules, so that's fine. I'm
pretty sure he'd probably get in the team, no problem. But it would be a bit unfair to everybody else, I think, Stephen.
Yeah, Drew Miller was an exceptional case. A great player, but he was only here 2 months, I think, maximum. But I'd probably have him in the all-time great team, but for the fairness of our overall team, I think it's better that we don't have him.
Yep, so we've paid our homage to Drew Miller and his brief appearance with the clan, so we'll move on straight away to doing our goaltenders. Stephen, who was your selection at goaltender?
This was a no-brainer for me, I think. There was only really one person that it could be, Kyle Jones. 2 seasons with us, one great season, one probably not as great season as he would have liked, but yeah, the easy choice for me, Kyle Jones.
And Graham, what about yourself?
Well, unsurprisingly, I've gone for Kyle Jones as well. I had a good first season with us. When obviously last season started, I think many people outside of the clan had doubts about him, thought he was perhaps a weak link in the team, and basically he's proven people wrong on that. His stats are better from last season to the previous one, and he's been solid, and definitely my choice for goalie for the all-time team.
I think it's a pretty easy choice considering who we've had. Kyle Jones for me has definitely been the best goalie we've had. Stats-wise, he beats the other ones out the park. Currently with a career for the clan, career goals against average of 2.65 and a save percentage of 0.910, which is by far above any of the other ones we've had. So for me, Kyle Jones was a no-brainer. Was there anybody else that you would have considered, Stephen?
Looking back from my hazy memory of clan games, I think in my opinion, the second best goalie probably would have been our season 1 goalkeeper, goaltender JFP. He is quite solid, but I would have to say he was nowhere near in the same league as Kyle Jones has been the last 2 seasons. Sumo, he was okay as well, but I've had to choose between the other 3 goaltenders or 4 import goaltenders we've had over that time. I would need to go with Jeff Perra.
And yourself, Graham?
Pretty much the same. I think the stats obviously back that up as well. GFP, it was a while ago now, but my memory of him was he could be absolutely outstanding some nights and really not quite in the game other nights. But for a first season goalie, he did his job. He did really well. We had a good defence in front of him, but he did a good job, and he would certainly be my backup, if you like.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement with that as well, which is going to make a pretty boring show if it's going to be like that all the way through. But when it comes to the goaltenders, it's pretty black and white. for me as well. Kyle Jones was by far and easily the first choice, and JFP, as you said, Graham, could win games when he was on his game. I also think Jacob had a few good games when he was shut down, which it happened quite a few times. He could win you a game, but he could also be quite inconsistent. So I think Jacko deserves a slight mention, maybe in the third level. Nell, somebody wants to say about the goalies?
No, I'll always remember the playoff quarter-final first leg in season 2, when Jacko stood in his head and gave us quite a good lead going down to Nottingham, but obviously we know how that went in the end. But just that performance was probably one of the best performances at Braehead goaltending wise, but not by Jones anyway. But yeah, Jacko, good goalie, but I would have to put him in as third choice as well behind JFP.
Yep, so for our purposes, Kyle Jones is going to be our goaltender in our all-star team. Moving on to the D. Graham, I'll come to you first. Who are your 4 choices?
Well, my 4 choices were from Season 1, Tim Wedderburn, and also from Season 1, John Landry, from Season 3, Steve Burnstill, and Season 4, Scott Arson.
Stephen, what about yourself?
I was pretty much the same. I had John Landry and Tim Wedderburn from Season 1, Steve Burnstill from Season 3, and a bit more recent, I had Jamie Fritsch from this past season.
Yeah, my choices are quite similar. I had John Landry and Tim Wedderburn, followed by Scott Arson and Jamie Fritsch. So there's a bit of common ground there. Graham, do you want to go through some of your choices?
Yeah, I think, well, obviously Tim Wedderburn, he was with us for 2 seasons, and I think even these days, people would probably still hanker to maybe have him back, but he seems to have left the game for his own personal reasons. But the great thing about Tim Wedderburn was that I think probably in the first half of Season 1, really nobody talked about him, which was a good thing because he just did his job, and he wasn't, if you didn't have to worry about the defence from that point of view, then you had no reason to pay too much attention. He didn't make any mistakes, completely solid. He was a leader on the ice, very influential player, and I think because of that, probably going in towards the second half of the season, he began to get a lot of recognition just for being that kind of player. I can remember a televised game from Season 1, I've still got it somewhere in fact, where Dave Sims was singing his praises, and that was all part of him starting to get that real high recognition of just how good a player he was. And then of course that carried on into Season 2, were just more of the same. Didn't contribute a hell of a lot points wise, but as a solid stay-at-home defenceman, he was excellent. And so, from my point of view, he was a no-brainer to make it into my final team. John Landry, quality shines through, the cream rises to the top, and any other cliche you can think of. He went on to have, and still has, a great career. Obviously moving on to the ECHL and the AHL, and playing for, I think, 3 different NHL affiliates. So he's still enjoying a great career even now, and it's good to see somebody move on from the clan on to bigger and better things. And he was just, as I say, he was just a class act and contributed a lot points-wise as well. So he was again a no-brainer. Steve Burnstill, which is obviously one of the ones that we don't all agree on. Steve Burnstill was an absolute standout from an otherwise fairly forgettable Season 3, other than the aforementioned Drew Miller, obviously. And it was Steve's, it was his offensive ability. I always remember the way he brought the puck up from the defensive zone. It was just a joy to behold, and we always commented as a family, we could just watch him with the puck all day long, doing nothing but that. It was just fantastic to watch. So he brought a lot of offense ability to the defense we had, obviously, and he was the standout from Season 3. And then Scott Arson, just solid, absolutely solid. Rarely makes mistakes, contributes a lot points wise. Obviously, he's just come off the back of a very good season. Primarily in the first half, where he was producing a lot of points, that dried up a bit towards the end of the season, but again, he's solid, he's reliable, very much a player I'd like to see back again, and again for me he was a no-brainer to make my all-time team.
Stephen, what about your choices?
I'm quite similar. I've went for John Landry, Tim Wedderburn, Steve Burnstill and Jamie Fritsch. Landry and Wedderburn, especially in season 1, they were just a class above. I was new to the British game. I just started following Clan after a very long and trying stint supporting the Maple Leafs in the NHL, and I wasn't sure of the quality that would be playing in this league because I knew nothing about it, and just seeing players of like the ability of Landry and Wedderburn playing for the Clan, it just stood out above like most of the rest of the team. Really, just great players with who at times looked like they were too good for this league, as obviously John Landry went on to show. Burnstill, I'm the same as Graham. Great player, very few highlights in season 3, but he definitely was one of the highlights. And just seeing him bring the puck forward, scoring some important goals for us, especially against Dundee. I think it'll be 1-4-3. He scored in the last minute just to give us that glimpse. Still, we're in a chance of the conference at that time, and I think that goal pretty much kept us in it for another week. Obviously, we went on to win it with some fairly convincing defeats against other teams, but the trophy's all that matters. And Jamie Fritsch, well, I agree with Graham about Arson. I love Arson as well. I thought Fritsch came in this season and nobody really knew too much about him, and he just came in. He was Tim Wedderburn-like in the way that he just kept his head down and got everything done. He just went about it, no fuss, no real errors on his part, and he just seemed to slot into the team in a way that I don't think very many people were expecting, especially with big names like Fitzgerald and Fitzgerald coming back and coming in, and we thought he would be like the main D-man to get it done for us. So yeah, well, I wouldn't be against Arson going in. I think Fritsch has got a really good case as well.
Yeah, I've not got much difference between what's been already said about John Landry and Tim Wedderburn. I think possibly Landry's been the best D-man that we've had. If I was to pick, a top guy, Tim Wedderburn not far behind. No nonsense, big stay-at-home D-man, no fuss. And again, your comparison, Stephen, with Tim Wedderburn and Jamie Fritsch is pretty spot on. I think the only difference between Wedderburn and Fritsch is maybe Fritsch wasn't quite as big a body, but he's certainly got a bit of speed that Wedderburn maybe didn't have. But all in all, they're both very, very similar players. So for me, Landry, Wedderburn and Fritsch, Arson was the other one I took. I just think Scott is kind of Wedderburn-like, if you like. He's pretty solid. You don't really notice him much. Doesn't take a lot of penalties, surprisingly, for the amount of minutes he plays. In terms of import D-men, he just overtook Tim Wedderburn in terms of appearances for the Clan. He's now played 118 games, whereas Tim had played 116. Both of them stand out D for me. Both of you brought Stephen Burnstill. Again, I've got nothing against Stephen Burnstill. For me, he would probably have been one of the ones that was bubbling under. He's what we call maybe for me a more offensive D. He's scored plenty of points, quite a few goals as well. So yeah, what about the ones that you had, Graham, that were bubbling under?
Well, there was quite a few, obviously. Jim Jorgensen was certainly one who was with us in season 2. Obviously, we've just recently seen him in action, winning the playoff championship with Coventry. He was a great player, great shot on him. Contributed a good number of points for us in season 2, and I think he then went on to Sheffield after that and played in France before he's come back to the Blaze. So he was certainly one that I considered. Drew Bannister as well, who was obviously our player coach in season 2. I think the only problem with Drew, unfortunately, was that he'd seen his better playing days already. So he was making a few mistakes, and even he himself was talking that perhaps the on-ice aspect was beginning to catch up on him a little bit, and he was certainly openly talking about quitting the game from a playing point of view. But from an experience point of view, he obviously played in the NHL. I think I had 164 games I've got down here as playing in the NHL for Edmonton and Tampa Bay mostly. So vast experience. Again, he was the right... It would have been nice if Bruce Richardson had stayed on. He was, I think, the right kind of character to guide us through that potentially difficult season 2, kept the team in an even keel and kept the upward curve going. So, but if we're not assessing on a player coach ability, he was obviously excellent as a D-man, but as I say, past his best. Jamie Fritsch was obviously on my list, and I won't talk about him. Everything's already been said about Jamie Fritsch, and has certainly been one of many high points from this season just gone. So he probably just missed out, I think it's fair to say. And likewise with Ryan Kavanagh. Ryan Kavanagh, obviously he picked up some injuries this past season, but he's been a bit of a revelation, I would suggest, and we certainly missed him when he was injured during that closing spell towards the end. I think if he'd been playing for us, we might be still celebrating a league championship right now, but that's just my own personal view. And obviously, and I've included Zach Fitzgerald as well, just simply because immense experience. You can't ignore the fact that this is a guy that's been acknowledged as the most penalised player in the AHL, I think something like for 2 years. And he has been part of bringing that whole new physical dimension to the team that as Clan fans we've been missing from day one. We were always primarily a skillful team, and certainly Fitzy coming into the team this season has helped take us on to that next level and made us far more physical. And not to everybody's taste, obviously, but I would suggest that's mostly other teams' fans. And if other teams' fans don't like him, then that's got to be good news for us. So I think he's been important. I'd certainly like to see Fitzy back for next season. But yeah, he was another one who was just bubbling under.
Yeah, I think that's one of the problems I think we've got with the format we've chosen to do, is just to pick 4D, 6 forwards, etc. It's not a team building exercise, whereas if you were building a team, the likes of Zach Fitzgerald or Chris Frank, for example, would be some of the names you would certainly be considering just to take that role over that's maybe not prevalent in the way we're deciding to do it. But I think it's worth noting that this exercise we're doing today is really just for fun. Stephen, what about yourself? Who did you have that was bubbling under?
Yeah, that was pretty much the same as Graham. I'd throw Chris Frank in there. He was the first real sort of player that we had that we knew we were going to have that physical presence last 2 seasons ago, when we'd been crying out for someone who would come in and take no guff and drop the gloves if needed, and in a way that you knew that he would give someone a decent fight. We've had players before that would try and fight, and you just thought, why bother? Like Kyle Bruce and Cedric Bernier. They would give it a go, but you thought, you're just wasting your time here. Whereas with Frankie, we had someone who would give a good showing for himself, and I think this last season we saw him, even though he was served more suspensions this past season than the one before, I think we saw him in a more of an agitating role, and I think that was a role better suited for him when you had players like Fitzy and Salters who could drop the gloves and win a fight decisively for you. So Frank is an agitator. I think he was really good for us this past season, and I think he did get more suspensions, but despite that, I think his penalty minutes were far lower than the previous season, because you had someone like Fitzgerald able to take more penalties. And I love Frank as well, so I think we should have given him a quick mention.
Yeah, I mean, we've all talked about Frank in terms of his agitating, his policeman role, but I think because of that, a lot of people underestimate how well he could actually play the game. Frankie was in the zone. I would argue that there actually weren't many defenders that much better than him that we've ever seen, including the 5 or 6 that we've mentioned so far. So for me, he's not that far away. And if you were picking a proper full team, he would certainly be very worthy of consideration for that. Looking on at where we've all got to so far, it looks like John Landry and Tim Wedderburn are pretty much unanimous. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So that for me, that leaves us with 3 getting into 2. It looks like Scott Arson, Jamie Fritsch and Stephen Bunstall are kind of bubbling for 2 places. How are we going to sort this one out?
Paper, scissors, stone.
To be honest, for me, there's not much between the 3 of them. Let me see. Graham, you and myself had Scott Arson, and whilst Me and you, Stephen, had Jamie Fritsch, and Stephen and Graham had Burnsell, so it's really...
It's a difficult one. I think obviously Arsene was one of my picks, and as much as I like Jamie Fritsch, I think the fact that Arsene's basically done the business for us for 2 seasons now, it's that consistency that I think also backs up his case, shall we say. Obviously Jamie Fritsch, hopefully I'd love to see him back, and if he does the same job again or even better, then fantastic. He would be an automatic shoe-in for doing this exercise next year. But I think Arsene, having contributed solidly for now for 2 seasons, that's the reason why I would push his case.
Yeah, for me, between Arsene and Fritsch, defensively there is not much to pick between the two of them, aside from maybe Jamie Fritsch's speed. However, Scott Arsene is actually the Clan's top point scoring man of all time, and I think it's just maybe that points production, particularly in his assists, that maybe just sways him a wee bit for me. And I think you could say the same for Stephen Burnsell. Stephen Burnsell was quite a large point scorer. I'm not sure if I could put Stephen Burnsell in the same league as Scott Arsene or Jamie Fritsch in terms of actual defensive ability. I think it was just maybe a shade behind the two of them, but he certainly was a more offensive D-man and scored plenty of points. What about yourself, Stephen?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the way I was trying to even it up a wee bit, where you'd have a line where it was one offensive and one defensive D-man. I think that's why I've went the way I have. Burnsell was a personal favourite, don't get me wrong, but I could easily remove him for Arsene. I would keep Fritsch personally, but I'm willing to negotiate, so to speak.
Okay, so we've got John Landry, Tim Wedderburn, Scott Arsene, Jamie Fritsch and Stephen Burnsell, and there's not any impasse coming, so I'm going to take the role and decide that it's going to be Scott Arsene and Jamie Fritsch going through, and honourable mentions to Stephen Burnsell. How's that suit you?
I can deal with that, yeah.
An honourable mention we'll just have to do, but I'll tell you, he won't be happy. He will not be happy, but fair enough.
We're going to go on now, just before we finish up, to discuss a couple of things that have been going on in the league this week. Obviously the first thing as far as the Clan's concerned, although it wasn't such a major surprise, was Zach Sullivan signing on for an extra year. How do you feel about that one, Stephen?
I'm delighted. There was a couple of rumours going about the other week where the reason he wasn't signed, announced as returning so quickly, is because he was in discussions for an extra year on his deal, and I was getting a bit antsy when there was still no announcement forthcoming, because I thought he was great for his last season, a real gem, a player that nobody was really expecting to log many minutes or play as much as he did, but when he did play, he showed a maturity beyond his years, let's say. He just seemed to get his head down and get on with it. So to hear that he's back for a further 2 years is great news, and along with Jordan Cowney on his 2-year deal, I think we've got two of the best Brit prospects in our ranks going forward.
And Graham, your thoughts?
Exactly the same. I think it sends a clear message to the fans, the league in general, about how much we're trying to build a proper Brit squad. We've had a great squad of Brits this past season. I'm a little bit concerned about Ben Davis in terms of what his plans are. His tweets saying goodbye to the fans sounded a little bit too final from my point of view. But I think Zach Sullivan signing up for a further year. A year extension is great news. Delighted, and I agree with Stephen. That coupled with Jordan Cowney is great news from a Clan perspective. The Brits are going to be important. Obviously, we've been told that we're going to be playing 4-line hockey. There's lots of debate about what that actually means on a week-in, week-out basis, but there's no doubt about the fact that every team's going to have, probably more than ever before, need to have a real solid core Brit squad to rely on. And this is certainly part of that, so yeah, delighted.
Yeah, I think it ties in quite well discussing Zach Sullivan with the news that Paul Swindlehurst has signed for Nottingham. It was a player I kind of hoped we might be able to tempt to Bray Head, but I think it highlights, I would like to think that Zach Sullivan becomes another Matt Haywood, in terms of that we gave Matt his chance. He's been here for 5 years, we've watched him develop, and I'd like to think that would be the same scenario with Zach Sullivan. Now he's tied for another 2 years. That would bring him up to 3 years with the Clan if it's seen through. And I'd like to see him develop. I'd like to see him develop to become a part of the GB setup, which is not in any shape or form beyond his abilities if he keeps progressing. And I think that's something the clan will maybe have to look at for the future, is to give the younger guys a chance, give them their ice time, and hopefully build up a little bit of loyalty. Because when it comes to competing for the big Brits, with the likes of Nottingham, Belfast, Sheffield, it might be, at this moment in time anyway, we're still falling a wee bit short. What's your thoughts on Paul Swindlehurst's situation, Stephen?
He was a player I'd like to see at Clan, but I've also got someone who I'd rather see at Clan than Davy Phillips. I like Swindlehurst, but I think for just now that Davy Phillips is a more complete player, and I'm hoping that it's a case of we were going to sign Swindlehurst, it was one or the other kind of situation, and instead we're getting Davy Phillips. That's no way of knocking Swindlehurst at all. He's been quite solid for Dundee the last couple of seasons, but I had a favourite going in. I didn't think we'd sign both of them, so we'll need to see how that one goes. If we don't get Davy Phillips in, I think I'll be ruining it a bit more than I am just now.
Well, we have heard Davy Phillips rumours, but whether they're true or not, time will only tell. I think for me though, we have to have another solid Brit D. That would give us the chance to only sign 4 import D-men and release another import forward, which maybe would have helped if you think about the end of last year when we were kind of struggling over the finish line with injuries. That extra forward might just have been enough to score that odd goal, to get that extra point at Edinburgh, just to see us through to the end. Graham, what's your thoughts on the Paul Swindlehurst situation?
Yeah, I agree. I think like most people, I had high hopes that he might come to the Clan, and to be honest, I was very disappointed when I read yesterday that he'd signed for the Panthers. But I think there's lots of Brits out there. My concern is that I can only imagine there's a mad scramble going on behind the scenes right now, with every team trying to pick up the best Brits that they can. Obviously, there's Brits also, very, very good Brits that we know, who are playing in the EPL and deciding to stay in the EPL because they can make a good living out of it, which is further disappointing because there's players. I mean, I'd like to see Matt Toe back and players of that calibre, but they, as I say, they're applying their trade in the EPL and doing fine out of it. So there's not a lot of Brits out there to choose from, and as I say, for that reason alone, you would like to see a player of the calibre of Swindlehurst come into the Clan, obviously. But like I say, we'll see how it comes out. Finner's been very good at giving the Brits plenty of ice time, and obviously I think that was a massive part of Zach Sullivan's breakthrough this year, because he did get lots of ice time and had the opportunity to show what he can do. And I think any Brit coming to the Clan will be aware of that and take comfort from that. So time will tell, but yeah, I can only hope that we've got our eyes on Davy Phillips. Fine, as I say, there's a lot of players out there, but I can see there being a mad scramble right now trying to get signatures on contracts, and hopefully our people do the business and we end up with a solid Brit squad again.
Well, especially in the light of the revelations that there's going to be all these teams playing 4-line hockey, they're going to have to stack up with Brits. And that's something, again, you're right, Ryan Finnerty has been true to his word. We've always managed to get a decent core of Brits. Oh, you're right, talking about Ben Davis, we don't know what's going to happen with him. Hopefully, if he does decide to leave the Clan, we'll get a decent replacement in for him too. Going on to other news that I think is worthy of talking about before we finish up, is the situation at Sheffield with Gerard Adams. Graham, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the whole league was shocked, having had the chance to think about it for a few days now. I can see both sides of the equation. Clearly, Tony Smith has a vision of where he wants the Steelers to go, but to me, it just seems to be reactionary. Okay, you could say that Sheffield won the league because we managed not to, falling at the last hurdle. So maybe the league, for that reason alone, doesn't mean quite as much as it might previously have done. But the fact of the matter is that Steelers still won it. He got them to 2 other finals, and okay, this is the danger. Sometimes you can get to 2 finals, but if you don't then go on to win, then that's seen as a negative, and everybody forgets about the fact you actually got to the final in the first place. So I personally feel that Gerard Adams has been hard done by. because I think his record, starting off with that, obviously that playoff win shortly after he took over at the Steelers, I think his record is extremely good, and he seemed to be well respected amongst the Sheffield players. And it was a real shock when that news came through. And I think, for me personally, and again, I don't run a hockey club, I have no experience of that kind of thing, but to me, it'll be interesting to see if they already have somebody in line for the job, because the attraction of going to Sheffield Steelers as a coach when winning the league isn't good enough to keep you in the job must make it a hell of a challenge. I know there's lots to talk about with the under-20s coming in and various other aspects. You could be talking a bit more of a director of hockey type role. Clearly, Sheffield have got big plans behind the scenes in terms of the whole management structure, and that probably fits in with the way the league is going in that respect. And Sheffield's one of the few teams that can actually, they have the resource and the capability to do something like that at this stage. But for me, it makes the attraction of going to Sheffield and coaching a team whose standards appear to be so high that even winning trophies, especially the one that you covet most of all, isn't enough to keep in the job. That seems to me a very, very strange situation, and I can only imagine that Tony Smith has got somebody in line. The whole Weber thing, obviously, Dave Sims was his bit, and I think the Star this week was interesting, where he came out with a quote about the fact that it wasn't Tony Smith that sacked Gerard Adams, it was Weber. I really don't subscribe to that. I mean, okay, Coventry won the playoffs against a very disappointing Sheffield team in the final, but they still got there. And I think if you're going to let people go because of something like that, especially when you look at a situation where Nottingham have gone the other way, they've had a poor season, and obviously Corey Nielsen's been around for a long time, I think 10 years now with the club, but they've shown the complete opposite approach. They're showing loyalty and backing. It's going to be fascinating to see how it turns out between Nottingham and Sheffield, and in the context of the league overall next season, because there's two of the top teams that have taken completely different approaches to the coaching situation. And I think if it doesn't work at Sheffield, then the daggers will be out for Mr. Smith himself about how he's running the club, because to show no loyalty, and loyalty is a pretty rare commodity in anything nowadays, be it sport, business, or anything else. But I think just to make a sudden change like that because you didn't win the playoffs is probably doesn't bode well for anybody who's looking at taking on that job. But shocked is the same as most other people, and well, I would wish the Sheffield luck in what happens next season, but obviously I wouldn't mean that, so time will tell.
I don't particularly buy into this. They lost the playoffs and that's what cost him his job. You can't base your decisions on a one-off game. We all know the playoffs, once you get there, can be won by anybody, and that's certainly borne out this season. I think the decision had already been made. And again, in my position in that is, you don't know what their plan is, you don't know who they're bringing in, and until you know who they're bringing in to replace them, it's a difficult one to judge. And who are we to judge? It's his hockey team, he can do what he wants with it. I think you're right in terms of the approaches of difference of approach between Nottingham and Sheffield. It can't augur well, and it can't help recruitment when Sheffield have that reputation of being cutthroat. But then it's a cutthroat business, and it's a results-driven business. But then you're saying the results-driven business is to win the league, and they won the league. So it's a really difficult one to call. I think for us, bringing it back towards speaking about the clan, I think the one thing that we craved was consistency over our first 4 years, and then we got Ryan Finner to stay in his second year. We've now got him tied down again. So, I mean, I would prefer to have that consistency. If I'd be a Sheffield fan, I would be a little bit concerned as to what road it's going to go down. It's alright to talk about all these grand plans, but I would be worried and waiting to see exactly how that transpired. But again, I'll go back to it. You can't judge the decision really until you find out who the replacement is, and it's the hindsight police. A year from now we'll be talking about it, and we'll be seeing, well, was it the right thing to do, was it the wrong thing to do, and time will tell. Stephen, what would be your thoughts on that situation?
I think Coventry showed with the appointment of Mark Webber just after Christmas, at Christmas time, whenever it was, that it's time to step away from what some on Twitter have been calling the IHL Goldfish Bowl. Over the years, we've just seen coaches move from team to team to mixed results, really. And I think Coventry have shown that if you go out and get someone new to the league who's maybe not got an idea of how it works to begin with, but can in time implement their own coaching style to it, then results will come. I mean, Chuck Webber had a good pedigree. I think it was the AHL he came from, if I remember correctly. And I think this is maybe what Sheffield are thinking. Maybe it's time to go a new approach and just, you know, stop taking coaches for other EIHL teams. But at the same time, it's hard to judge, as you said, because we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. There seems to be rumours that maybe Sheffield have got Chuck Webber. Obviously I have no inside knowledge of this, but yeah, I agree with you. We'll see how it goes, and this time next year we can sit and have a half an hour discussion about whether it was the right idea at the time or not.
So there you have it, the first part of our clan all-time team. Kyle Jones, John Landry, Tim Wedderburn, Scott Arson and Jamie Fritsch. Join us next time and we'll be talking about the forwards and the Brits. Meantime, you can catch us on Twitter at PurpleArmyPod, or on the forum www.purplearmy.rocks.